Hey everybody, it's EZL back again with another video, and this time this video is mainly focused on helping people who just purchased the Sp404 Mark II in creating their first beat. Some of the topics that I'm gonna touch on are importing your samples, drum shots, drum loops, recording a little bit from your phone into the Sp404 Mark II, creating patterns, creating a sequence, a little bit of the FX, and then eventually getting to the point to where we talk about exporting everything from there into a DAW, so that way maybe you can mix it and master it down and eventually release it one day. So if you're just now picking up the Sp404 Mark II, this video is for you. Hopefully I can help you in creating your first idea. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So let's get started on making your first beat in the Sp404 Mark II. Now to get started, if you're wanting to flip something like a sample or a loop, there's two ways about going about that. So one way is by creating a folder on the SD card that's going into your Sp404, and you can import from that folder. So for example, I have my SD card in here, and if I hit this button, which is shift, and you're gonna want to hold shift and then click pad 14, which right there it says import export. It's gonna bring up this menu where it says import from SD card, export from SD card, format, cancel, so on and so forth. What we want, of course, is to import. So you're gonna take this knob and you're gonna press it. It's gonna bring you up to sample or project, and you're gonna want to sample, because sample is where all your sounds that you put on your SD card, your drums or anything like that, that's where they go. And so you go into sample, let me go back, and basically this brings you up to what's on the SD card. So you can, whenever your card is formatted for the for the Sp404, it's gonna create a folder for backup, export and import, and then probably the system information here. Now these other extra folders that I have, you might not have, just depending what you name your folders. Like I created a folder for my drums. So if I click in here, it's got a bunch of like Beat Butcher, a couple other people, lo-fi type of drums or whatever. But this is where you would import, and all the blinking pads in whatever bank you're in are the pads that are available. So these yellow lights here, the ones that are blinking, basically are available for you to import whatever. So for example, let me just bring some drums in. Let me go to my drum folder. I'm gonna go to, let me go to the latest Beat Butcher, and I'm just gonna go to kicks. As you scroll through these sounds, you can hear a preview for them. So that's like one preview, but if you wanna hear it again, you can just tap the sub pad, and that lets you hear what it sounds like. So if I like that kick, for example, let me put it right here on pad 13. And it stops blinking to let you know that that's the pad you've selected for that sound or loop or whatever, what have you. So I'm gonna go through and just go a little fast forward to a couple of drums I'm gonna pick, okay? So once you're done with picking each of your sounds or drums or loops, whatever, then what you can do is just hit exit again, and it'll bring you back to the bank that you were originally in. So for example, down here, all the lights that are lit, or excuse me, all the pads that are lit up, that lets you know which pads have sounds on them or which have loops. So if I click them, there's my kick, that's a snare, or excuse me, that's a hi-hat, then two snares. Now I have a sample that I recorded from my phone, which is another way that you can record into your Sp404 for like a loop or just some sound that you want to chop. So if you want to record a loop or something that you hear maybe on social media or just online via your phone, which you would do to get that recorded into your Sp404, is you have a line in back here, which you can get a cord that is like 2/4 inch cables for the left and right, going into a headphone jack, which goes right here, as you can see, into my iPhone. And you're going to, after like you find something and you want to record it, you can pause it, and in the Sp404 you would hit the red button here, record. It's going to tell you to select a pad for recording. So all the ones that are blinking are the ones that you can choose to record into. So I'm going to pick pad 2, and it says wait, and that's basically no sound is coming through. So it's the machine is waiting for you to press play on whatever you want to record. So let's just say I have this loop right here. I'm just going to press play. And then once you're done, what you would do is you would hit the record button to stop it. So it's done. And as you can see, now pad number 2 is lit up. So if I press it, whatever, you know, everything, whatever I played on my phone allowed me to record it into here. And then you can flip it from there. So that's 2 ways to get, you know, a sample, get your drums or anything into the Sp404 when you have an empty bank. The next step that you're gonna want to do is to basically, if you want to chop a sample, you know, so the way to do that first is to go into start end up here. It's under the sample edit, and it's right here. This is going to bring up the waveform that you recorded. And so as you can see here, it has the waveform. And what you want to do is look at making sure you have it where you want it to start and then where you want it to end. So for example, this little S is the start of it. And if I take this scroll wheel / button and just scroll it to the right, it's going to zoom in to the very beginning. And as you can see right here, there's like a little bit of silence, a little bit of a part of the waveform that we don't necessarily want. So what you want to do is highlight the part that you don't want. And what you can do is, if by moving the, I think it's Control 1, that moves the waveform, or excuse me, the highlight. And so what I can do is just press it. Okay, and I'm like, okay, I kind of like that if I move it a little bit. Okay, so I like where it starts. So that way, this whatever's highlighted, it'll eliminate when I'm ready. So I'll scroll back out by scrolling to the left with the wheel here. Now, the next step is going to the end, making sure that you don't have any silence or you don't have something there that you don't want in the chopped part. So in order to look at the end, because if you just scroll with this, it's going to take you to the beginning. You're going to want to hold Shift and then Control 3 is what you turn to get towards the end. And you'll see it slowly start to zoom in. Just keep going, keep going. And like, okay, there's no silence there, which is cool. And then you can kind of just hold the button, let it play through, see if you like where it ends. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So I'm like, cool, I like that. So what you can do is, once you've kind of picked the parts that you want, or you chopped it exactly like the beginning where you want it to begin, and then also if you're okay with the end, of course, I'm not really doing as much detail work as I would normally do, but this is just to show you. You're going to press the little turn wheel here, and it's going to bring the options for truncate, normalize, and emphasize. And truncate is what you want, because what that means, it's getting rid of the parts that you highlighted. So that way it's a lot more, it's chopped how you want it. So if you highlight truncate, highlight, it's going to say working, then it's done. Then if we zoom back in, it's started exactly where you wanted it to. So you're good. So that's how you get the sample first, how you want it. Now, before you go into actually chopping the sample, one thing I would recommend is messing with the pitch beforehand, just so that way, if you like it as it is, you don't necessarily have to mess with the pitch. But if you want to chop it at a different pitch, I would mess with that before you actually make your marks as to where you want the chops to be. So the way to get there is you see a button here that's unhighlighted that says pitch speed, and it brings up this menu. So you have speed, pitch, and then volume. That just lets you know, of how loud it is and so on and so forth. So you can mess with the speed, which would be this wheel, which Control 1, if you turn it, let me turn it from over here this way, you mess with the percentage mark. Now, if you want a little bit more of a, I guess, just like a more simpler, I guess, messing with the pitch, what you do is just mess with Control 2, which matches with the pitch of it. And then it just gives you kind of like these random numbers to, change the sound of it. So, for example, that's pitch down 3. Let me go back to the original first. So that's what the original starts off as. But if we bring it down maybe 3, so that sounds good, right? So let's just say, or maybe you want to speed it up, you can just go the opposite way, go to +3. And then you just pitch it up depending how you want to chop it up. Usually sometimes I'll mess with pitch just because it's a little bit more of a quick way to mess with the pitch and speed of it. But the speed, sometimes I like to mess with it to fine tune it a little bit more. But anyway, let's say you get done with, let's say you want it down 4, right? And let's say, okay, cool, I got it down to 4. Now what's the next thing to do? You're going to exit. Now this is where you can start to chop. And so you see start in there. What you would do next is to hold down shift and then click start end, which would go into chop mode. And then here it brings up the waveform, and what you'll see is the first pad on whatever bank you're on is highlighted. That's the first part of the loop. That's where it starts. So if I click it, it starts blinking, and then you have 2 blinking pads to let you know, okay, now you can tap the next following pad to put wherever you want the next chop to be. So let's say it's going, I want to go back to the beginning. I'll press pad number 1, and it'll take it to the beginning. Let's say there's chop 2. Now, as you can see on the waveform, it leaves a mark. Let's say I want to mark right there too. That's a 3rd one, a 4th, and so on and so forth until the end of the loop. And then once it gets to the end, I think it stops there if I remember correctly. Hey everybody, I actually forgot to record something, but I went back and wanted to add this in for the chopping segment here. I forgot to mention, so when you're chopping samples and you're in chop mode, you can click on them and you have your selection and so on and so forth. So if you do them like we just demonstrated, if you ever feel like maybe you want to adjust a chop to a certain way in order to move each chop, or as mark as they're called here in the Sp404, what you would do in order to select maybe one that you want to move a little forward or move a little back, is what you would do is you would push on the pad. So like I'm on pad 2, and you're going to use control, if I remember correctly, control 2. Yeah. And so that moves it. And then basically, you can go in here and then, do what you want to do. Or if if you're kind of too far away, what you can do is zoom in to whichever pad. So if you want to zoom in, say into pad number 4, which is a short chop, you can tap it, make sure it's highlighted like it's shown here on the number 4, it turns to a white light, and then it's going to zoom into the one that's selected. And then to get it to stop, if you don't want it to do this, where if it keeps going and you move it, does that, you can just hit exit and that'll pause it. So you can kind of go in, zoom in, fine tune it like that, and then say you want to try it again. And then you just press X to stop, exit to stop it. And so I forgot to mention that in the first recording, but I wanted to go ahead and add that back in here. So back to the original video. Okay, so once you've gotten the chops where you want them, so I haven't detailed it like I would normally, but just as an example, let's say this is one way that you could do it, to where you just kind of that's how you want it, right? What you can do is either do it that way, where you do it manually yourself, or you can take the spin wheel, press enter, and then you have an option to auto mark, which is basically like a chop. You can assign it to a pad if you're happy with the chops that you have, or you can delete all of them. So if I wanted to, I could delete all of them. What auto mark is basically just letting the machine chop it for you. So if I were to go into auto mark here, it's going to give you a time division. You'll come up to this menu where it's basically if you want to do it via time division, or let me see if I can change this. Yeah, you can do levels, transients, but most of the time you really don't need the other 2 that I'm aware of. I mean, you could mess with it, but I know mostly more of the time division. And all that is chopping it into, right now it says 8, so it would chop it 8 times. It'd give me 8 chops and fill up these 8 right there. You can always change it with this one, which you could do, 8, you can go all the way up to 16, and just to fill up like every single bank. So if you wanted 5 chops for some reason, it could automatically do it for you. And then that's just a way sometimes if you're feeling a little lazy and you don't necessarily want to put in as much work, or per se you have a loop that is exactly like on 4/4 time, and let's say it's 8 bars long, you can go do a division of 8 and it'll chop it perfectly if it's already like a perfectly looped sample. But I'll get out of here. Let's say I want these chops. I'm going to assign it to a pad. Here is where you start to pick the pads that you want the chops on. So there's 5 chops. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those 5 are basically lit up except with this last one. Once you filled in the pad of the available of the available pads, you're gonna hit enter. It's gonna be working, and boom, you have the chops now. You'll still have this pad that has the entire first loop of whatever you were sampling, but now you just have the chops. Let's see. So see, it ends there. And so it's just, your chops that you have, and you can mess with that and then, make it into a type of sequence. So once you have that, you're good to kind of like mess with it. A tip here, because I know you noticed as I'm playing it, sometimes when I'm holding it, it'll play it, but then it'll stop once I take my finger off. To kind of stop that, which you can do if you just want one pad to do it, you just see this gate is lit up, and gate is just basically preventing it from playing as soon as you let go. So if I have type pad 3 or hit gate, and then now it continuously plays. But then if I press gate again and I tap it, it goes back to where it stops whenever I take my finger off of it. Now what you want to do, because what can happen sometimes, let's say 3, just the chops that I made, I'm going to take them off of gate. So for example, I played this. So if I play 2, they're now they're butting heads with each other, and you don't necessarily want that. Sometimes you will, depending on maybe the type of music that you're making, or maybe you just have something that you want to play together, and that's cool. Then you can leave it like that. But if you're making like, I guess, hip hop, or like just lo-fi stuff or just whatever, to prevent that from happening, to where let's say I want to go from 3 to 4 without it interrupting each other, you want to go into what's called mute groups. And basically just remember what bank you're in. I'm in bank C. Holding shift and tapping pad number 8 brings you into a mute group, and this is basically going to prevent the pads from clashing together. So I'm going to go over to pad C, which is empty, and I'm going to put all the pads, of the sample in here, so that way they don't butt heads. So let me do. So after I've highlighted them here, they're blinking. That's it. You don't need to do anything else. You can just exit. And then now when I tap a pad, so now they no longer clash with each other. And so that's like good. Most of the time I just do that with the sample. You don't necessarily do that with drums, just because if you have a hi-hat, just going on with the kick and the snare, you want them they're okay with like going with each other, just because they're the drums. The samples is usually what you don't want to clash sometimes. So that's how you take care of that. Now from here, the next step, once you have your chops, once you have your sample, and you've got everything where you want it to be, now it's time to record. Now recording, you want to record, let's say like a 4-bar loop, a 8-bar loop, you can do that. So let's say, let me turn this up a little bit. I want the sample to go. Let's say I want that, right? So what you can do in order to record is you're going to hit pattern select right here. And then what will happen is, make sure you're in the right bank. It just brings up pattern. And sometimes, you know, it'll be empty if you don't have anything there. But in order to record a pattern, once you're in pattern select, you hit record, and it's going to ask you to record and, you know, pick a pattern to pattern pad that's available, which is blinking, in order to record whatever you want to record. I'm going to record in 1. Then what comes up is it tells you the BPM, the length that you want to make it, and also the strength of it. So this is more so for like quantizing the strength of it. So with the third one, you would mess with the quantization however you want to. The length is going to be control number 2, which, you know, most of the time I'm doing 4 to 8 bars, just because that's the type of music that I'm making. And then with the BPM, you can kind of like mess with the first control 1, and you can change it. So let me think. I think I'm gonna go for 80, 4 bars. And for the samples, I'm gonna keep the quantize 100% just to keep them on time. So once you got that, you're gonna hit record again. It's gonna do a count in, and then now it's recording. Now, if you're not recording, or excuse me, if you're not ready to record and you kind of want to rehearse it to the metronome that you hear, you can just press record again, and you'll see quickly it'll show rehearsal, which means it doesn't record anything. So I can listen to the metronome and try to get everything on beat. So let's see if I listen to it. We can go. So, okay, so let's say I figure out the sequence, you know, the pattern of how I want to do it, right? What I'm going to do, then if you're ready to, after you've rehearsed however you're going to play it, hit record again. So now it's ready to record. Let's go. Let's see. Let me do this counter real quick just to get it. So, you know, that was just a little pattern. And so now it's still recording. So if I were to add anything else, you could do it in this moment. But if you go back to pressing record again, it'll take you back to rehearsal. And then this is like another way to go back into rehearsal to record how you want the drums to sound. So let me see. So let me take all the gates off. Okay, so let's just say, you know, you're just letting it play and you want the drums to start here in a second. You just want to figure out how you want it to sound. Okay, so let's say you figure that out, right? Now you're like, okay, cool. I know how I want the drums. I know how I want the kick. I know how I want the hi-hat. I know how I want the snare. Most of the times I know I like my drums to swing. To go back into the settings, there's 2 ways. One, you see up here, it says grid. And then you can like mess with control 3 and that'll mess with the grid of it. But I'd go back into record setting. Let me go to, no, let me actually do the kick on 100 just because I'm just gonna do each element by itself. So now you got the kick. Okay, cool. And then let's say I want to do this, the snare next. What I'm going to do, go back in rehearsal real quick. I'm going to bring this down for the hi-hats and the snare down to like 50%. And then go back to recording, make sure I'm in recording. Let's go into the snare next. Went a little bit over, but that's okay. And then now you have your snare, right? Cool. And then let's say after that, now you can usually record wherever. You don't have to wait for the one. You can record wherever, you know, you feel comfortable. But next I'll do the snare. Let's just keep it, or excuse me, the hat, real simple. So that's like, you know, a cool little idea. And let's say by chance, let me stop it real quick. So once you have the pattern that you want for the loop and your drums, then you can, you know, you have it here wherever you recorded it. And then from here, you can do different variations. So like, for example, let's say, you know, you wanted you can do like an intro to where you only have the sample itself. So let me hit record. Let me create another one here real quick. You have, let's do 4 bars, go back to 100, hit record. Let me just record this. Okay, cool. Let's just say I want that, right? I can just hit exit, and basically that's its own pad. And so that can be an intro. And then once you're in pattern sequencer, you can hit, this will just loop this, whatever pad is highlighted right here. And then let's say I want to go into it like the one with the drums, I can just tap it and it'll go right into that after it's finished. So like that, right? And then basically you would follow the same process of recording different variations. So like, you know, let's say if I go back and I hit pattern select to get back into my sample bank here of C, and let's say I wanted to do, you know, I can just record different variations for whatever section I want and just do it that way. Let's go back into now to the pattern sequencer here. And this is just basically all the patterns that I'm creating. You can do stuff too where, like, you know, let's say this one where I have the sample playing, it'll keep playing if you press pattern select. And if you want to keep messing around, it'll just constantly loop. So you can just kind of like mess around with stuff and figure out what you want to do. The next thing that you can do, which the Sp404 Mark II is really great at just with this machine, it has great effects. So like, let's say, let me turn this up just a little bit. You want to mess with the effects, you know, you have like the filter. You have a resonator, delay, isolation. What I really like about this is some of the effects in here. Like, I like to go into the more effects here, and you have a 303 vinyl simulator, which is like a compressor, and it has noise in it, and you can kind of mess with the noise, the wow, and give it that, you know, that old warped sound. And then what's cool is you have 4 buses for effects. So that's bus 1. If you see this button right here, bus effects, bus 1 is the one that I put the vinyl warp on. Bus 2 is empty. So now, as you can see, it's lit up because that's where it's at. Press it again, it's empty. Sometimes what I like to do is go in here and get to like the cassette simulator, mess with the tone, the hiss, the age of it. And then basically that gives, you know, it gives a sample a little bit more of a feeling to it, just creating like a vibe, you know. And so once you have that, let me see, you can do 2 more types of effects, which if you hold down shift and you go into effect settings, this brings up the first 2 buses there, and it's basically like a chain. So you have, you know, your first FX, the second bus, and then you have the third and the fourth. And by kind of scrolling right here where it's highlighted on favorite, you can go through some presets. So like it has just like a couple of presets. I think it was like 10 to 11, something like that. I can't really see from this angle, but you can create your own presets. So right here it says bypass, meaning that there's nothing there. In order to put on some effect on there to create your own, with Control 3 you scroll to bus 3, and basically you can press enter, bypass will be highlighted, and then you start just going through effects. And let's say you like that, you press enter again, and you can go back to Control 3 and go to bus 4. Then you're done. And then if you go back, now you have this as a favorite. So that way you have bus 1, 2, 3, and 4 doing that. And then you can even hear what this sounds like with the drums on it. So I'm gonna let that go. Let me exit real quick. So now it's gonna go into the sequence with the drums on it, just to see what it sounds like. And then you can just have fun with it, you know? So that's a way to basically create some cool loops in there. And like I said, you can go through, you have all these paths when you're in pattern select to create just different variations, you know, like an A side, a B side, or something like that for a song. Now let's say, for example, that you get all the pads that you want, you found your sequence, and you think that, okay, cool, I want to export this beat to my SD card so I can put it into whatever DAW that you use. Like I use Ableton and Logic sometimes, and you want to bring that in here so that way you can sequence it better, and you can you know, mix it down and master it, and then eventually potentially release it, hopefully. The way to do that is, let's say, you know, all the effects that I put on here, I also want that to export, because sometimes originally in the older firmwares it didn't export, but what Roland has done is you can bounce each element of the beat, so that way they all have the effects, and they all have it sounds exactly as it does in the Sp404, and when you take it to your DAW, it'll sound as it was coming from there. So what you have to do is bounce every single element. So for example, I'm gonna go into pattern, and let's say this is the one that has the sample loop and the drums. What you want to do is click it, and let me turn this down just a little bit so you can hear me. So once you have it clicked, you're gonna hit copy. You'll see this menu come up for pattern, and it says remain samples to copy. And basically what that means is if you type remain, it can separate every single element that you pick in order with the effects, so that way it's by itself as it is in this pattern. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm gonna hit remain, and it's gonna say select samples. Let me go to the right one. Sorry, I'm in bank C. So these are all the pads that are used in that pattern. This is the kick, snare, that's the snare, and these are the samples. So let's say I want the samples by themselves without the drums. I'm gonna highlight them, so that'll let you know that they're highlighted, they're strongly lit versus like dimly lit. Then I'm gonna hit remain again, and then I'm going to exit pattern mode, and you'll see like these blue lights come up, and the ones that are blinking softly are the ones that are available for you to put stuff on, because the other ones are being used by, you know, your samples or your drums or whatever. So you have to be mindful of how much space you have, or you could just use another bank if you have space there, right? So let's say I want the samples on 8. This is only going to copy the sample part, not the drums. So once you have it clicked where you want it, hit enter. It's going to say working, and you'll see this loading bar come up to let you know that it's processing it. And then once it gets to the end here, it's going to say operation completed. Now, if you hold it, you have the sample loop with those effects on it. Now, for some reason, I want to give this tip, and this is a very big reminder when you're exporting it, because, you know, you would do this with your sample, with your drums. For some reason, every time you bounce, sometimes it adds a little bit of silence at the beginning and the end, which can throw off the BPM if you have it, or excuse me, the BPM or just the length of the sample. And next thing you know, you import it into your DAW, and you're like, why is my beat off? Like, why? I don't get it. So this is where we just bounced. You want to go back into start end, and then you just want to zoom in just to double check. So if I zoom in, you see here, it adds that silence. I'm not too sure why, or maybe this will be fixed in an update, but it adds that silence. And so it knows that that's silence right there, so it's highlighted. And then what you want to do is double check at the end as well. And you see here as well, there's silence. And it does that every single time you bounce something. So as a reminder, this is a very important reminder part. I'll probably put up something here to look, just very important. Remember to double check each time you bounce something, just to make sure you don't have extra silence, because if so, it'll throw off the whole loop of how you have it. So because it's highlighted, I'm going to hit truncate, or press enter and then hit truncate so it gets rid of it. Let's zoom in one more time. And boom. Got rid of that silence. Cool. And then basically, to go back through the process, you just bounce the rest of everything else. So let me just do that real quick. I'm going to copy pad 1, hit remain, and I'm just going to do all the drums all together, even though I wouldn't normally do that. That's the kick, hi-hat, and the snare. Hit remain again, get out of pattern select. I'm going to put it on 12. Do the same thing you did for the samples, and let it work, let it do its thing, and bounce it. All right, then once it's done, you can hold down the pad that you sent that just the drums to. And it has the effects and everything like that. Double check to make sure that there's no silence at the beginning and end. As you can see, it's just the drums. Yeah, see the drums as well. I can probably tune it. Let me see. Cool. Let me hold shift and control 3 to zoom in at the end. Okay, there's that. And then go back. And then once you've highlighted that, like I said, from the first one, truncate it again, just to get rid of that. Let's zoom in one more time. There you go. No more silence, so. Cool. Then, once you've bounced the parts of your beat that you want separated, so the samples, maybe each individual instrument, or excuse me, each individual drum shot, the next thing you can do now, you can exit. You're going to hit shift, hold down shift, hit pad 14. This time we're going to export to SD card. And you want to do sample because Project, as of right now, from what I remember, Project only deals with like if I want to export those in a project, to where if I give this SD card to another person that uses the Sp404, they can pull it up as it is and mess with it if they want to. It doesn't have anything to do with like, like in a DAW or something where a project is saved. It doesn't do anything like that. So you'll want to go into sample, and it's going to ask you which pad you want. And, as we remember, the sample is on 8, and then the drums are on 12. You just hold those two, and it's going to say, please select, and then enter. It's going to work. And then it's going to give it like some generic name, like new sample pad 18, and then new sample pad 12. And then after that, you just bring it in, you eject your SD card, put it into your computer, and then you go into the sample folder, and there you have it. Like, you have the sounds, and then that way you can sequence everything to how you want it. You can sequence the beat, and then now you can mix everything individually or however you want to do it in the DAW, and then eventually mix it down, master it to hopefully release it one day. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you were able to gain some information, or I was helpful in some way in creating your first idea in the Sp404 Mark II. If you have any questions about the video, or just have any other questions in general, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.